Welcome to Umbraea, where the dead whisper and forgotten truths still breathe. Bask in the dark, my midnight minds, but never be blind to the truth. Some stories refuse to fade, not because they are loud, but because they are unfinished. They settle into the background of our collective memory, resurfacing without warning. A name, a photograph, a question that never learned how to rest. This is one of those stories. It begins at the end of a celebration in a house still warm with light, still carrying the echo of voices and music, still arranged to suggest safety. By morning, something had shifted. A child was missing. Then she was found. And what followed was not clarity, but a slow, spreading uncertainty that never receded. Years passed. The house emptied. The headlines multiplied. Uncertainty dissolved into speculation. This is not a story about answers. It is about absence, about what happens when truth fractures. It was Christmas night, 1996, in Boulder, Colorado. The house was full of the quiet aftermath of celebration. Lights dimmed, decorations still in place. The soft disorder of a holiday that had just ended. Inside were John and Patsy Ramsey, their son Burke, and their youngest child, JonBenét. Earlier that evening, they had been somewhere else. A party, laughter, a sense of completion that comes at the end of a long day. Nothing about the night announced what was coming. They returned home, doors closed, lights went out. The house settled. Hours passed without sound, without interruption, without anything that would later be remembered as a warning. Or so it appeared. Morning arrived quietly. Patsy Ramsey woke before the others. She moved through the house by habit alone, down the stairs, through the familiar geometry of a place she knew by heart. That was when she saw it. Several pages of paper placed carefully on the staircase, out of place, impossible to ignore. The note was addressed to her husband. It spoke of money, it spoke of instructions, and it claimed that JonBenét had been taken. In that moment, the house changed. What had been shelter became uncertainty. What had been private became exposed. Police were called. Friends were summoned. Rooms were filled with movement and voices. But one presence remained absent. JonBenét was not in her bed, not anywhere she was expected to be. And the night that had seemed to pass without incident had not passed at all. The note that was left behind was long. It was not a single page, several pages in all. It was not hurried. It did not look like something written in fear. It was carefully written, deliberate, almost. It spoke in a voice that was unfamiliar, formal in places, and yet strangely casual in others. It claimed to be written by a group, not one person, but a faction. A presence that existed only on page. The language was specific. The amount of money was precise. An exact sum, one that mirrored a recent bonus John Ramsey had received. The note offered instructions. It warned against involving police, and it promised consequences. It remained placed on the staircase, not hidden, not concealed. It did not behave like a message meant to disappear. The paper came from inside the house, and so did the pen. There were drafts. As the morning unfolded, the note became the center of the house. Read, reread, read, reread again. Interpret, question, interpret, question again. It was meant to explain what had happened. Instead, it complicated everything further. Morning unfolded slowly. The ransom note had promised a call. It had given a window of time. It had warned that any deviation would bring consequences. None of that governed what followed. Police were contacted almost immediately, and friends were called and asked to come. Within hours, the house was no longer private. People moved freely through the rooms, kitchen counters filled with cups and plates. Phones rang, conversations overlapped. The house stayed busy, but direction was absent. Officers searched the property looking for signs of forced entry, looking for what might be visible at a glance. They did not search every room. They did not open every door. The basement was left untouched. The assumption had already taken shape. JonBenét had been taken from the home. Whatever had happened, it had happened elsewhere. So they waited. They waited for the phone to ring. They waited for instructions that matched the letter. They waited for proof that the threat was real. The time listed in the note passed, then passed again. No call came. The letter remained unanswered. The house remained full, and nothing explained the silence. What should have been a moment of urgency became prolonged stillness. With every passing hour, the range of possible outcomes narrowed. And while the house remained occupied, something within it went unseen. As the morning stretched on, certainty began to erode. The assumption that JonBenét had been taken no longer held its shape. John Ramsey moved through the house once more. This time, he went lower. The basement was dim, a place for storage, a space that did not belong to daily life. In a small room at the far end, behind a door that remained closed, he found her. JonBenét Ramsey was lying on the floor. She had not been taken from the house. She had never left it. What had been treated as a kidnapping ended there. Police returned to the room. The focus of the investigation shifted in an instant. The house was no longer a place to wait. It had become the center of the crime. Evidence had already been touched. Time had already passed. What remained was finality, and a story that would never move forward in a straight line. Investigators returned with urgency, but the morning had already left its mark. The rooms had already been walked through. Objects had been moved. Time had passed without preservation. Evidence was no longer pristine. Some of it was already lost. The focus of the investigation shifted inward. Attention turned to the family, to their movements, to their words. Public sympathy and suspicion began to coexist. Outside the house, the story spread. Headlines appeared. Speculation followed. The case was no longer contained within walls. It belonged to the public now. And the public wanted answers. But clarity did not follow exposure. Instead, the case fractured. Different theories emerged, different interpretations of the same facts, different conclusions drawn from incomplete information. What remained constant was the absence of resolution, and in that absence, the story began a second life, one shaped as much by perception as by evidence. The days after JonBenét's death did not bring resolution. They brought division. The investigation shifted repeatedly. Early assumptions gave way to internal focus. Attention turned inward, toward the family. Statements were taken. Timelines were reconstructed. Small inconsistencies were noted, then magnified. Public confidence in the investigation began to erode. Evidence that might have been decisive had already been compromised. The scene had not been secured quickly enough. Critical moments had passed unrecorded. As months became years, the case stalled. No charges were filed. No clear suspect emerged. And each attempt to move the investigation forward introduced new questions instead of answers. Outside the official inquiry, speculation grew. Media coverage expanded beyond the facts. Television specials, books, and later documentaries offered competing interpretations of the same evidence. Public opinion fractured. Some narratives focused on the family. Others insisted on an unknown intruder. Each theory relied on selective certainty. Pieces elevated and others dismissed. Time altered the case in quieter ways. Witness memories faded. Physical evidence aged. Opportunities narrowed. Scientific advancements offered brief hope. DNA testing introduced new possibilities but did not deliver final clarity. The case remained open. The conclusions remained unsolved. What persisted was not a single explanation, but a collection of them, layered over one another, each shaped by belief as much as by fact. Decades have passed since that morning in Boulder. The house has changed. The people involved have aged. And the world has moved forward. The case has not. What remains is a child's name, spoken carefully, as though saying it softly might protect what could not be protected then. What remains is a story that never learned how to end, a question that outlived the moment it was asked. And at the center of it, a girl who became a headline before she was allowed to grow. JonBenét. You were 6 years old. You were not meant to carry this weight. You were not meant to become a mystery. The world has spent decades searching for meaning in what happened to you. But meaning is not the same as understanding. And understanding has never come. What remains is remembrance. Quiet. Unresolved. Held gently, even when certainty is gone. Some stories are not solved. They are carried. And you are still carried with us. Stories are often shaped by what we're shown, but not everything visible is true, and not everything true is visible. It asks for discernment in what we see, and attention in what we're willing to hear. You've been listening to Umbraea.